From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The University of North Carolina's Board of Trustees votes unanimously to create a new school committed to free expression in higher education. Yet both the UNC faculty and the school's accreditor have a meltdown. Plus, President Biden is from the federal government, and he is here to help you by cracking down on junk fees in the economy. Should you want him to, we'll tell you some reasons why you may not. Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Kim Strassel, and I am joined today by my two fabulous colleagues, Colin Levy and Alicia Finley. So let's start with this fascinating fight at UNC. In late January, that university, which, by the way, was the first public university in the nation, its board of trustees voted 12-0 to create a school of civic life and leadership. This is going to be a discrete school. It's going to have its own dean. It's going to hire professors to teach in departments ranging from history to philosophy to religion. Students will be able to take courses through it to fulfill their core university requirements, or not if they don't want to. And what's really interesting to me is that it's designed to buck ideological conformity. Its goal is to get professors from across the spectrum. So let's in fact listen for a second to UNC trustee David Bolek talking about that mission.
There's no litmus test for the hiring of professors. But clearly a curriculum with the engagement of diverse viewpoints, I think would attract a wide variety of professors, liberal, conservative, centrist, those who can engage students.
So, Colin, you've been following this. This sounds to me nothing short of exciting and brilliant. And yet this vote has caused a huge backlash among the faculty. Tell us a little bit about what they are angry about and who is saying what and why.
Yeah, it's really an interesting story, Kim. What's happened basically is that the faculty found out about this new school after the Board of Trustees voted on it, and they got very upset about it. They said, that's our prerogative. We're the ones that get to call what's going to be in our curriculum. And I think they felt put out. The chair of the faculty, Mimi Chapman, told the Daily Tar Heel that, she was flabbergasted at the trustees' decision. And other professors said that they were really just shocked that these things were in the press before they knew about them. But the key issue here we have to remember is that in North Carolina, the responsibility for the public universities flows from the North Carolina Constitution through the North Carolina legislature and through the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees. So that's what happened here. And the Board of Trustees was really doing what its duty was, to create new spaces for new ideas. And I think the point that you bring up that is really important to address as a substantive issue, which is that, so many outlets have pounced on this as though the idea of creating a new school for ideas is somehow a conservative idea that's going to be pushing a conservative agenda. And I've seen nothing here that would suggest that. I don't think that's what the school's going for at all. I think the real idea is not to have some sort of ideological program, but on the contrary, the whole purpose is to create a new, vibrant space where people can debate ideas and where new professors will encourage that in their students and encourage them to engage with each other. I'm not sure that we really grasp how much is intellectually gained by students who are forced to defend their ideas on either side, to get out of this kind of social media sinkhole that we're all in sometimes, where all anyone hears are the voices that they've selected to hear, and then similar voices who are selected for them. So, that's true on the left and it's true on the right. And I think people are losing the ability to logically or civilly debate ideas of major consequence. And that's something that our universities are supposed to be providing for us.
Yeah, the thing that really struck me about this is you're right, Colin. This is a different idea. And I think it's getting lumped together with some of these programs, which, by the way, are very worthy that you've seen happen as schools have moved ever and ever left. You've seen, for instance, attempts to set up like a discrete program within a college where existing faculty, they might have a new free speech program or a civic life program, and they'll bring speakers into campus or host lectures. That's not what this school is about. This school is about getting a wide range of voices. And Alicia, it strikes me that, as Colin was saying, something that's desperately needed because conservative voices have largely been shut out. But this program's idea is not that. But I remember 7-8 years ago, the University of Chicago claimed that it was committing itself to free expression on campus. And all these universities came out, including some in the Ivy League, to say they bought into this idea. But most of them have failed to live up to it. And what's interesting to me is UNC is attempting to actually live to those ideals. I mean, we do have a problem, don't we, Alicia, on campus with a lack of voices across the spectrum?
I think that's right. If you look at this college fix survey of 14 humanities and STEM departments at UNC, Democratic professors outnumber Republicans by 16-1. In the English department, the ratio is about 23-1. And in chemistry, it's 28-1, which is kind of unexpected because you typically consider, STEM fields and sciences be in college what we would say that that's a hard discipline, whereas the others are more fuzzy. And that typically the hard disciplines like chemistry, math, computer science, that they tend to be at least less political than the disciplines like, liberal arts disciplines, English, philosophy, sociology, and such. But what's really also surprising is that at other state colleges, it's not nearly as lopsided. Like at Ohio State, the faculty ratio is 7-1 and for Democrats to Republicans, and at University of Nebraska, Omaha, it's only 5-1. And that may have to do with where the universities are located and some self-selection there. And which I think it goes to a broader problem in academia is this self-selection bias that it's become such a hostile place for conservatives that most don't even want to go or get a PhD. Maybe there are other good reasons, economic reasons not to get a PhD because the job market in academia is really limited. But it's also, why deal with this? Why deal with the hostility when you're just going to be essentially ganged up upon by your fellow faculty members and deal with administrators who don't respect this free speech and diversity of views? So as a result, I think the universities are becoming much more ideologically homogenous in terms of their faculty. So what UNC is doing is potentially shake things up and make campuses a little more welcoming to conservatives with PhDs, and encourage, therefore, a more diversity in the PhD pipeline.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me what you say, Alicia, because as a mom who has got kids that are getting to college age, I'm struck by how many other parents I now talk to that are specifically eschewing some of the Ivy League and elite schools and trying to get their kids to take a closer look at some state universities just because they feel those campuses are a little less woke. But Colin, it's interesting. So great idea, I think. And yes, it's one thing for the faculty to complain, but it turns out there is a bigger threat here. UNC is now facing an attack. Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges. This is a body that accredits UNC, which matters because colleges need accreditation to be eligible for federal dollars. So this is a somewhat powerful outfit, and it's now wading into this fight. Colin, tell us what's happening here.
Right. So it was a meeting last week on Tuesday of the Governor's Commission on the governance of public universities in North Carolina, which in and of itself is sort of an interesting thing because, as we talked about before, the responsibility for the universities really flows through the legislature. But governors created this sort of oversight board to talk about what's going on at state schools. And it was at this meeting that the accreditation official, whose name is Belle Whelan, came in and said that the UNC board would be getting a letter of some kind from her agency. And that was immediately perceived to be a potential threat to accreditation. And she basically said, look, we're waiting for the school to explain what's going on here because that's not the way we do business, meaning the trustees were, by creating this school, we're sort of breaking the mold of, the faculty monopoly on what's going on there. And that would somehow threaten the legitimacy of the school, potentially threaten their accreditation. Now, Ms. Whelan went on to say that this was just a letter of inquiry, that because this had attracted media attention and she'd heard about this, that it was her group's responsibility to look into what's going on there, and that all that she was going to be doing was issuing a letter of inquiry. But I talked to her and basically asked her, well, if this is, in fact, that the trustees did this, would that threaten their accreditation? And she just emphasized that this was something that was the responsibility of the faculty. And nothing exactly reassuring in that, though she did go to say there's a long process here that has to be gone through. But it's rightful concern because, there's something of a playbook developing here. I think as other schools start to look at the possibility of creating similar institutions, the way that the University of North Carolina is in terms of this being a bit of a model, you can see where the pushback's going to come from. The pushback is, well, if you try to do this, we could potentially mess with your ability to get federal funding.
I find this very disturbing, although sadly, it's not necessarily unexpected. It brings to mind, Alicia, I think what this is doing is highlighting again, we actually do have a problem with some of these really powerful accreditation boards. And I know the Trump administration tried to change some of the rules because if they came out and went after you, it was essentially a death blow to you. So they have this extreme power. They tried to change the rules to give colleges and universities the opportunity to get approved by different accreditors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that whole situation?
I think that's right. And the other initiative that the Trump administration took on the accreditation was to allow for profits in particular, which the Obama administration had tried to. The Department of Education actually has to recognize the accreditors. And so if it doesn't recognize the accreditors, the schools that are accredited by the accreditors can't qualify for financial aid. And to your point, that's basically a death blow. So the power really stems at top with the education department. And we've seen numerous times over the last decade or two how the education department and officials there can really abuse their power over the accreditors to kind of push their own agendas and drive their political imperatives. I wrote an editorial, again, more than a decade ago about how a bureaucrat at the financial aid office had pushed a creditor of a for-profit college run by former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld to pull the accreditation of the college because he had some kind of, essentially a vendetta against Bill Weld based on past personal history. And then more recently, the Obama and Biden administrations have pulled the recognition of a major accreditor for-profit colleges. And as a result, left these colleges hanging, and they've been scrambling to try to find another accreditor. But the issue is there just really isn't much competition in the accrediting space. Many of them have essentially monopolies in their regions or within their sectors. And so the Trump administration tried to encourage more competition and more choice.
Yeah, all of which just reminds me again to ask the question, why do we have a Department of Education? Does anything good come from it?